So it's November 7th, 2018, and we had Ajahn Naniko here for a couple of weeks. And he has 40 vasas now. That there's this sense that time just keeps passing on and on. We just keep getting more senior, keep getting older. And there's that sense that like an ending of a chapter, beginning of a new chapter. And Ajahn Krunadamo and Debbie have accompanied Ajahn Naniko to the city, and I think he's teaching at Stanford this evening, and be heading back to England tomorrow. And Tan Rakito just had his bhikkhu ordination. So there's a sense of a new beginning, and in just a few days, this coming Sunday, Anagarika Jordan will be taking his Samanera ordination. And then we'll have the Thanksgiving retreat coming up soon, and then the winter retreat. So another year is passing us by. So as we try to think about Dhamma, try to understand Dhamma, it's good to contemplate these different things like the reflections of the Noble Eightfold Path that we chanted this evening. And to try to perhaps call into question some of the preconceived ideas we have about Dhamma and about practice, maybe more specifically about meditation practice. Like what actually causes samadhi, what actually acts as a cause for samadhi. So like the Buddha's talking about right concentration, and all he says is secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, one enters and remains in the first jhana. I think that's really interesting. Because the Buddha speaks very clearly, very straightforward way, very precise. He speaks what needs to be spoken in order to convey a certain understanding in the suttas. So he says, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, one enters and remains in the first jhana. With vitaka and vichara, which is translated as applied and sustained thought, with piti, sukha, which is translated as rapture and pleasure, and then it says born of seclusion, so based on seclusion, arising from seclusion. So the Buddha says, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. The Buddha doesn't say having plugged away at your meditation object for so many hours, so many weeks, so many days, so many years, one enters and remains in the first jhana. All he says is secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. So this is very interesting. I think the meditation object, whether it's Buddho or the sensation of the breath or some sort of mental image, is a very small part of, it's a very minor factor in the meditation. And our teachers teach about this constantly, and Luang Por Chah taught about it constantly. But have we really understood that point, that vital key point? So, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, this implies the sila, the virtue that we take on. It implies sense restraint. That's the secluded from sensual pleasures part. So that's the not attending to the sense restraint, to the senses, but rather going inwards. So that implies a letting go of desire. And the Buddha also referred to the sama samadhi, or the right concentration, or the right, as in the translation in Thai is maybe better, the right steadiness of mind. And the Buddha said it's dependent on the sense restraint. And it's also termed as a temporary liberation of mind. And also, when we talk about that word jhana, it's also classed as a Brahma realm. So it's not one of the desire heavens, but it's actually, if one were to die in the state of, say, the first jhana, one would enter into the first jhana Brahma world. So it's not even classed as a desire realm, which is interesting. And it's also classed as a Uttari Manusa Dhamma, or a super mundane spiritual attainment. So it's, what that means is that the first jhana is not something that ordinary people experience. It's something that is beyond human experience, or not classed as a human experience. It's a higher than human experience. So we can weave together all these teachings in order to gain some sort of idea or some sort of understanding about what the Buddha is pointing to here. And so this kind of thing takes practice. I mean, for myself, I don't have these things, and even the Kruba Ajahns will say you need special type of karma from past lives for this to come naturally to you. And I know monks who are really good monks who I consider to be adept in meditation, and even they will tell me that that this is not something that comes easily or is easy to get to. So when we talk about jhana, it can be a bit of a hackneyed term these days, but we shouldn't just throw it around lightly, or we shouldn't just talk about it as if it's something ordinary. Because there's lots of types of samadhi that don't fall within that definition. And so it's good to just contemplate, do we understand this correctly? Do we know what the Buddha is actually pointing to here? So when the Buddha talks about sama samadhi, or right concentration, he also says that the four jhanas are some of the heaviest good karma that you can make quickly. So it's the flip side of the anantariya kamas, or the heinous crimes, which would cause an automatic hell rebirth. So the jhanas would, or we'll say sama samadhi. I just don't like to use the word jhana just because it's such a misused term and so kind of used in a way that I believe is lower than what it's actually supposed to be pointing to. So I'll say sama samadhi. When the Buddha talks about sama samadhi, he's saying that's the automatic heaven generative karma, and specifically Brahma karma, meaning it's not just the lower desire heavens, but they're actual referring to Brahma mental states or Brahma realms. We can also link these together with the Brahma Viharas, because it also is in the suttas that this type of samadhi can be accessed through things like metta. So where most of us are at, we're just trying to deal with desire and just getting by, just getting by day to day, trying to gain insight into why we suffer. But that's kind of the beginning. I remember the second day I lived at Abhayagiri, we went up to KPY Monastery over the ridge to pay respects to Ajahn Tun, who is their Kruba Ajahn, and he's got a pretty incredible life story and practiced very, very hard in his own life, and he's now passed away maybe 10 or 12 years ago. But he was still alive at the time, and we went up to pay respects to him and had a Q&A session with him. And I remember being impressed with him, having never met a Thai Kruba Ajahn before, and I had been here as a guest previously, but when I came back to stay, I remember it was to stay long term, it was the second day I was here. And we had a question and answer with Ajahn Achalo, then Tan Achalo, 4 Vasas, translating for us, the Thai into English. And one of the points he made is to, especially for Westerners, to be careful of, we should know the Buddha's teachings really well in order to know if we do attain any of these states of samadhi, to know what we're experiencing. Because he said that there is a danger that if you were to attain the first jhana, it's almost certain that you'll think you've attained full enlightenment. And that can be a problem, because it's a type of happiness which is so much more extreme, and so the sense of relief so powerful, and it's something we've never experienced before. And the sense of relief, the sense of ease, the sense of brightness that one would experience having never experienced it before. And there's a danger that we'll think we've attained a stage of awakening, a stage of enlightenment, or not even think, but we'll be sure that we're enlightened. And he was saying that's a danger. He sees that as a danger. And especially if our mind tends a little bit towards more the unwholesome or towards a depressive mental state, then the juxtaposition, that the extreme relief and the extreme happiness that we experience with Samma Samadhi, although that being said, it's not going to happen if the mind is even a little bit unwholesome. So I think that it's important to not really focus on these kind of attainments, but rather just focus on what can we do to make our mind more wholesome? What can we do to make our mind more secluded? And what can we do to make our mind more and more positive? Secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. I think the sila, the virtue, is so important just to be able to see these things. So we're not like automatically following along with the unwholesome, but we start to see it a little bit. I guess that word seclusion is important as well, like in the Pali viveka, because especially in the monastic life, we're actually allowed to act in different ways that wouldn't really be acceptable in the world. So these things like speaking little, eating little, sleeping little, especially something like speaking little, we're actually allowed to do that and encouraged to do that in the monastery. So we can pass by each other, without always having to say something, without always having to greet one another. And it's considered that's just part of the monastic culture from Thailand, especially the culture of the Kruba Ajahns, where we're encouraged to speak little. But why do we even have that encouragement? And it's really so we can gain that sense of seclusion and that sense of going inward. And if you live in a monastery where a lot of the monks and novices, anagarikas, are actually practicing that sense of speaking little, you can build up a sense of camaraderie with that, where everyone has the feeling that they're practicing. Everyone has the feeling that they're going inward. So we're here in a community, living as a community, as a Dhamma family of sorts, where our sense of connection doesn't come through speech, but it comes through a mutual going inward, mutual practice. That's what the Buddha is pointing to with the word patipat, practice, training, cultivation. You have these stories of these ancient Chan monasteries in China where the monks would actually live in these like cubicles and practicing meditation, and that you could have monks living there for years and they wouldn't even know each other's names because the emphasis on silence and on going inwards was so kept. That was just the culture of the time, the Dhamma culture, the monastic culture of the time. We don't have to be that extreme here, but still it's good to recollect these things and think, well, that's interesting, that's something that has worked in the past. And then if we do have some sort of bright mental state or some sort of samadhi that arises, not to jump to conclusions as to what it is, but to be just watching it in a very sober way. Eating little it's not that we're fasting all the time. Sometimes fasting can be a problem in terms of we always want to be extreme. So the Buddha's not talking about going to extremes, but just eating little, just being consistent, just taking what's enough to have energy for the day, for the practice. Secluded from sensual pleasures. So if we really want the mind to go inward and really want the mind to be bright, then we can't be too focused on the food that we eat. It has to be just enough for nourishing the body. But it's also not about, say, not taking things like sugar or being vegetarian. Those things in and of themselves don't purify us. But it's more like in the suttas, like being okay with any old food at all, being okay with any old robe at all, being okay with any old dwelling place at all, being okay with any old medicine at all. So it's cutting through that proliferation about food. It's one of the blessings of being a samana, taking what's offered, is that cuts through the proliferation of food. Or like money, like Jordan will be taking Samanera ordination, giving up the use of money, and cuts through that agitation that arises through the use of money, through having to think about money. This is a way to make the mind incredibly wholesome and free of sensual desire. And then sleeping little. The Buddha said that one who's fond of sleep will not make progress like one who is not fond of sleep. So it doesn't mean not sleeping, but just sleeping just enough. Or like Master Hua would say, like, the physical body likes sleep, but the Dharma body doesn't like sleep. Or it's not good for your Dhamma body. So these are known as the Apanaka Dhammas, or the Dhammas that are never wrong. That's something Luang Por Cha and all the other Kruba Ajahns would talk about all the time, is that sense of eating little, sleeping little, speaking little. Or I liked that Master Hua quote from Ajahn Amaro when he gave the talk at City of 10,000 Buddhas a couple nights ago. Ajahn Amaro had a dream about Master Hua one time, or Master Hua gave him a gatha, or a verse, just that, something like, loud, flashy, and in your face is the false, subtle and indistinct is the true. So to see the subtle and indistinct, it's like we need to be going inward. We need to not be going out too much. I like to contemplate speech in terms of anapanasati as well, because speech is very connected with the breath. So if we talk too much, our breath isn't balanced, because you can't actually talk on an in-breath. When you talk, you're always going out. You're never coming in. So it's like, that's why, like Luang Por Pasano would love to use the phrase reining it in. It's like just reining it in. If we talk a lot, then we're mostly breathing out, and we're not breathing in enough. Or our out-breaths are long, because the out-breath, the words are occurring on the out-breath, and then we're having to do short in-breaths to do more out-breath words. So the anapanasati, the sense of speaking little, that's like gathering our energy, not dissipating our energy too much. Well, there's a time and place to speak, but just seeing, is it necessary speech, or is it just something which is dispersing our energy when we could be using it for mindfulness of breathing, or using the energy for some sort of Dhamma study. This is also Dhamma Vichaya, which is thinking about Dhamma, getting our mind around the Dhamma, trying to understand what's the deeper meaning of a lot of what the Buddha talked about in the suttas. What's the deeper meaning of what the Kruba Ajahns are talking about? When Luang Por Cha says that Buddhism is just the truth of the way things are, what do we see that? Are we able to discern that? There's Tibetan teachers who have said that it's actually very, very difficult to discern whether something is Dhamma or not Dhamma. So Dhamma is the truth of the way things are, but then if we make statements like, well, everything is Dhamma, or well, it's all Dhamma, so don't need to put forth much effort. Or if we take a verse of a poem written by somebody, say anybody, it could be, take like Rumi, for example. If we were to take a verse of Rumi and actually be able to say, is this Dhamma or not Dhamma? Very, very difficult. Is this in line with the Buddha's teachings or not? Very difficult. It might be good, it might be profound, it might make us feel happy reading it. But is it Dhamma or not Dhamma? That takes real discernment to see. And the Dhamma taught by the Lord Buddha is also very precise, very exact, each part of it is connected with the other part. And this is called you could call it either the unification of the Dhamma or the normality of the Dhamma, the consistency of the Dhamma. That every single part of the Dhamma, every verse, every sentence, every paragraph, every sutta, it all corroborates with every other sentence, verse, paragraph, sutta. And when we start to see that, then the faith starts to go up a few notches. It's kind of like, okay, the Buddha is... I knew the Buddha was amazing, but the Buddha was actually... You get these words like wonderful, the wonderful Dhamma. When people see the Dhamma in the suttas, they make exclamations like, wonderful, it is marvelous. It's like something upside down was turned upright. It's like something that was dark is now made bright. It's like I didn't have eyes before, now I have eyes to see. I misunderstood, now I understand. So there was darkness, now there's light. There's other places in the suttas where people make these exclamations, like where they've been following the Buddha for a long time. Say some of the Buddha's long-term lay followers, where they're in a state of bright faith towards the Buddha, and they make exclamations such as like, oh, how many unwholesome states has the Blessed One rid us of? How many wholesome states has the Blessed One bestowed upon us? It's wonderful, it's marvelous. And all these teachings, all these reflections, they're to help us, to give us encouragement, give us some sort of energy and inspiration. In Thai, the word is gamlang jai, which means, like, literally it means heart energy. But the meaning is inspiration, encouragement, give us a sense of wanting to move forward in the practice or developing a long enduring mind, the kind of mind that can endure the ups and downs of our life and still stay within the precepts, stay within the sila, keep practicing day after day. Keep trying to understand, keep trying to shine that light. And then maybe we'll start to understand the deeper meaning of secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. And we'll start to understand, what is this meditation that we're trying to do? And what is this patibat? What is this practice that we're trying to do? So even just that phrase, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, can be used like a mantra to keep us moving in the right direction. Because there's just so many ways we can get pulled away from the practice, so many wayward paths. But if we stick to the straightforward and simple teachings that we find in the suttas, that keeps us moving in the right direction. So I think that's enough for this evening. If anything was useful, please take it. If it wasn't useful, then please set it aside. So I'll leave it there.